Now, Isaiah 30 is a huge chapter in this section. This is where we've got to go back and actually look at Deuteronomy 32, because Isaiah 30 is really a retread of the Song of Moses that Isaiah kind of personalizes for his generation. But the almost line by line walking through Deuteronomy 32 and the Song of Moses, the similarities are profound. So what I actually want to do before we start reading Isaiah 30 is actually read part of Deuteronomy 32, the Song of Moses. So Moses, as he's just led Israel through a covenant renewal ceremony, he gives them this song, and his reasoning is very interesting. Look at what he says. We'll just start here in Deuteronomy 31 as he introduces the song. He says, "Now therefore write this song and teach it to the people of Israel. Put it in their mouths, that this may be a witness for me against the people of Israel." Well, that's kind of negative and a little pessimistic, isn't it, Abraham? "For when I've brought them into the land flowing with milk and honey, they've gone into the promised land, which I swore to give to their fathers, and they have eaten and are full and grown fat," guess what? "They will turn to other gods and serve them, and despise me and break my covenant." Can you imagine being in Moses' shoes? Here they've come through all these 40 years, and they're going to go into the promised land soon. And Moses says, even then, they're going to be rebellious. And so this song is going to be a witness for me against them in their rebellion. But Moses was not wrong. He's actually right. And so Isaiah is going to recall this and give it to them in Isaiah chapter 30. And he says, "And when many evils and troubles have come upon them, this song will confront them as a witness, for it will live unforgotten in the mouths of their offspring." This is exactly what Isaiah is doing. For I know what they are inclined to do, even today, before I have brought them into the land that I swore to give to them. So essentially, here's the song. "So give ear, O heavens." This is Deuteronomy 32. "May my teachings drop as the rain, my speech distill as the dew." Basically, here we go. I got a special message for you. "For I will proclaim the name of the Lord God, ascribe greatness to our God, the rock who is perfect." He's the sure one. He's the rock who set the foundation. The rock really is part of what Isaiah is referencing about the cornerstone, the one who laid the foundation of Zion. He is the rock, the rock. His work is perfect. For all his ways are justice, and God, a God of faithfulness, without iniquity, just and upright is he. They have dealt corruptly with him, they being his people. They are no longer his children because they are blemished. They are crooked and a twisted generation. This is exactly what Isaiah has been talking about in chapters 28 and 29. "Do you thus repay the Lord, you foolish and senseless people?" It's almost like Moses is looking forward into Isaiah's generation. Really, he's looking forward into the generation at the end of the age, but Isaiah says, you guys have inherited this with your decisions. "Do you thus repay the Lord, you foolish and senseless people? Is not he your father who created you and made you and established you, the one who set the cornerstone? Remember the days of old. Consider the years of many generations. Ask your father, and he will show you, your elders, and they will tell you. When the Most High gave to the nations their inheritance and divided mankind, he fixed their borders, the peoples, but the Lord's portion is his people, and Jacob his inheritance, or his heritage." Basically saying, God chose you. God set you up. Even though God set you up, Jerusalem grew fat and grew fat and stout and sleek, for he forsook the God who made him and scoffed at the rock of his salvation, scoffed at the cornerstone. They stirred him up to jealousy with strange gods and abominations. They provoked him with anger. They sacrificed to demons that were no gods, to gods that were never known, to new gods that had just come recently, whom your fathers had never dreaded. Basically, the Lord saw it and spurned them because of the provocation of his sons and his daughters. And he said, "I will hide my face from them. You're going to become blind. For they are a perverse generation, children in whom is no faithfulness. They have made me jealous with what is no God and provoked me to anger with their idols. For a fire is kindled by my anger. It burns in the depths of Sheol, devours the earth, and sets fire to the foundation of the mountains. God saying, I got wrath about this issue. And I will heap disaster upon them and spread my arrows on them. They will be wasted with hunger and devoured by plague and poisonous pestilence. And I will send teeth of beasts against them and venom of... Okay, good. For they are a nation void of counsel. There's no understanding in them. If they were wise, they would have understood this. They would have discerned their latter end. You could have been the one who chased 1,000 and put 10,000 to flight, unless their rock had sold them and the Lord had given them up. But again, since they rejected their rock, God said, I'm going to do the opposite. Is not this laid up in store with me, sealed up in my treasures? He's saying, I actually am the one who has your deliverance. Your promises are laid up in store with me, sealed up in my treasures. Vengeance is mine, and recompense for the time when their foot shall slip, and the day of their calamity is at hand, and then their doom will come swiftly. For the Lord will what? Vindicate his people. He will have compassion on his servants. He will deliver them. See now me, even I am he. I am the one. There's no God beside me. I kill and I make alive. I wound and I heal. There's none that can deliver you out of my hand. For I lift up my hand to heaven as I swear and I live forever. If I sharpen my flashing sword and my hand takes hold on judgment, then I will take vengeance on my adversaries and repay those who hate me. And onward, a pretty big description of God's judgment against the wicked adversaries of Israel. So there's just a quick run back down of Deuteronomy 32. Now, with that in mind, Isaiah 30. Stubborn children of Israel. The same lament as Moses, saying, here you are again, just as Moses had said, stubborn children of Israel, declares the Lord, who carry out a plan, but not mine, who make alliances, but not of my spirit, and that they may add sin to sin. He's again referencing that covenant with death, saying, you're doing it again. Here you are. You've repeated a past mistake, and you're inheriting the discipline of the Song of Moses. Now, this interesting thing of adding sin to sin, here in verse 1, Israel entreats alliances to mitigate vulnerabilities that stem from their covenant disloyalty. So because they sinned, they grow vulnerable. And instead of turning to the Lord to mitigate those vulnerabilities, they turn to other nations. And they're creating a sin multiplier. They're stacking sin on sin, because instead of turning to the Lord, they become over-reliant on outside nations that contradict their intended reliance on God. So he says, you're going to take refuge in Egypt? Don't take refuge in Egypt, because Egypt is going to be going through the same discipline. If we remember back to chapter 19, Isaiah prophesies about God's discipline falling upon Egypt at the same time as it's falling upon Israel. So he says, you're going to go down and take refuge in Egypt, but Egypt is going to be in the same issue that you are. You're not going to find any help from Egypt. And so he gives an oracle against Egypt and an oracle against the area of the southern desert below Jerusalem. It's a southern part of Judah, kind of the Judean desert between Egypt and Jerusalem. He says, even in there's going to be discipline and issues. It's not going to be a trusted source because you won't even be able to get to Egypt in that day. So he says, a rebellious people, and now go, therefore, write this on a tablet and inscribe it on a book. The same thing that Moses had said. Remember when he was writing that song and he said, go put this on write this down so that future generations will get it. Isaiah is saying the same thing, because this is going to be for a time to come and a witness forever. Isaiah is giving his version of the Song of Moses, just to elaborate, not to replace it, but to elaborate on it. For they are a rebellious people, a lying children unwilling to hear the same thing Moses said. They are unwilling to hear the instruction of the Lord. They say to their seers, do not see, and their prophets, do not prophesy to us what is right. Speak to us smooth things. Prophesy illusions. Their own imagination, things that confirm their own biases and that feed their own egos and their selfish ambition. So we may leave the way, turn aside from the path. Let us hear no more about the Holy One of Israel. What a terrible rejection. Therefore, thus says the Holy One of Israel, because you despise his word and trust in oppression and perverseness and rely upon them, therefore, this iniquity will befall you like a breach in a high wall, bulging out and about to collapse. Now, breaches in a high wall would typically develop over time. There would be a gradual breaking that might be slow enough to not be noticed. There's going to be this gradual erosion of your security to where suddenly it collapses, it breaks suddenly and in an instant. And its breaking will be like that of a potter's vessel that's smashed so ruthlessly. It's like a total breakdown. All of the false things that you founded your security and hope on are going to just be shattered in an instant when the Antichrist betrays you. That among its fragments, not a shard is found. There's nothing for you to rely on in that day apart from the Lord. That's kind of the purpose of it. He wants to take away any of those false things that they would rely on. For thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, the Holy One of Israel, in returning and rest you shall be saved. In quietness and in trust shall be your strength. But you were unwilling, and you said no. Even when Isaiah prophesied to them and warned them, they refused him. They called him gibberish. They called him a conspirator. And they were unwilling, and so they had to deal with God's discipline, which again is God still appealing with the same message. God's discipline is not a departure from that message in verse 15. It's just being spoken a different way with actions and judgment. But they still, even that, actually does start to wake some of them up, as he's going to describe. They say, no, we'll flee on horses, therefore we'll flee away. We can run to Egypt if we have to, and we'll ride on swift steeds. Therefore your pursuers will be swift. And 1,000 of you will flee at the threat of one. Now remember when Moses said, it would have been that a few of you would have made thousands flee. But he says, now instead, thousands of you are going to flee at the threat of one, until you're left like a flagstaff on top of a mountain, like a signal on a hill, solitary. Basically, you're solitary, you're by yourself. Because as thousands of you are going to flee until there's really only one spot left. The one flag left standing is going to be Jerusalem itself, the last flag standing. So therefore, the Lord waits. Now that therefore is important because there's that kind of section division in a lot of Bibles that have a little heading there, but this is a continuous message. It says, therefore the Lord waits because you've refused to receive my mercy and my grace. I'm going to wait. I'm going to withhold it. I'm going to restrain it for a reason until a specific thing begins to happen. I'm going to wait to be gracious to you because of all this. But the Lord is going to exalt himself still to show mercy to you. He's going to be ready. For the Lord is a God of justice, and blessed are those who wait for him. Even those patient people who are having to endure this discipline, those who are faithful, who are just in the collateral damage of this. He's saying, blessed are those who are going to wait on the Lord. If you will put your hope in him, you're going to experience the blessing. Because what? What is that blessing? For a people will dwell in Zion and in Jerusalem, who will weep no more. He will surely be gracious to you at the sound of your cry. Here's the appeal. He says, cry out to the Lord. Even so, even though you've done all this rejection, you've acted rebelliously, and now discipline has come upon you, you still can respond to this appeal here in verse 15. If you will cry out to the Lord, as soon as he hears it, he will answer you. And though the Lord give you the bread of adversity and the water of affliction, yet your teacher will not hide himself anymore. What a promise. And your eyes will see your teacher, and your ears will hear a word even coming from behind you before you even need it, saying, this is the way, walk in it, turn to the right or to the left. Then you will defile all your carved idols. You're going to get rid of all that stuff. Where was that verse about, in this way you will atone for your sins by destroying your idols? I'm sorry. Oh, I wonder if I've actually got it in the notes. Isaiah 30, verse 22. I do have it in the notes. So in the notes for verse 22, it says Isaiah 27, verse 9, where Isaiah previously prophesied. We looked at it last week. Therefore, by this, the guilt of Jacob will be atoned for. And this will be the fruit of the removal of his sins. He's going to get rid of all his idols. This is how you're going to know. We're going to abandon all those former things that we relied on. We're going to rely on the Lord alone. And when they do that, here comes the blessing. And he will give rain for seed with which you sow on the ground, and bread, the produce of the ground will be rich and plenteous. and the livestock and all the blessings, the seasonal blessings, great things, all good things of covenant fulfillment and covenant blessing that were previously described in Leviticus 26 and Deuteronomy 28. He's retreading those covenant blessings that Moses described. But he says, in the day of great slaughter, when the towers fall. What's interesting about that is he's looking at the end of the Song of Moses. When the Lord lifts up his sword of vengeance against the adversarial nations, that is when the day of great slaughter, when the towers fall. Now, by this point, when the Messianic age is coming into happening, the towers falling, the towers of Israel falling has already happened. So that's already dealt with. And in this context, the towers that need to fall are the towers that caused Israel's towers to fall. The adversarial towers are the ones that need to fall. Moreover, the light of the moon will be as the light of the sun, and the sun will be sevenfold. This is massive blessing, covenant fulfillment. These are all that kind of language. Behold, now, here it comes again. He says, now here's the moment. Here's how you're going to know. When you cry out to the Lord in that moment of tribulation, here's how the Lord is going to respond. Here is heaven's response when you cry out to him. Behold, the name of the Lord comes from afar, burning with his anger and with thick rising smoke. His lips are full of fury, and his tongue is like a devouring fire, his breath like an overflowing stream. This is the kind of God you want to have on your side. He is loaded to conquer Israel's enemies, to sift the nations with a sieve of destruction, and to place on the jaws of the people a bridle that leads astray. Now, in Isaiah's generation, this is a promise that does come to happen when in chapter 37, an angel of the Lord strikes down the armies of Sennacherib. So Isaiah sees a fulfillment of this in his day, but he goes on to describe a final fulfillment at the end of the age. He says, we're pulling from promises that belong to the end of the age, where there's a final permanent defeat of Israel's adversaries, where it will be never again will there be this kind of, not injustice, what am I trying to say? Disruption in Israel being disciplined in this way. There's a time when Israel's disciplined in this way where it's the final time, and it never, ever, ever happens again, because Israel embraces a permanent salvation. So what Isaiah is drawing on are promises that still await a future generation, but he called on them for his generation, and Hezekiah obeyed. Hezekiah cried out to the Lord in Isaiah 36 and 37 and saw the deliverance of God in this way. It's remarkable. So some commentators will say, well, this was fulfilled in that day, but no, there's actually a permanent fulfillment of this that's still yet future. Now, this phrase, to place on the jaws of the people a bridle that leads astray. I put something about this in the notes. Isaiah's prayers are answered. The Messianic deliverer, yes. The bridle is the hubris of probable victory against Israel. It's the dream that he mentioned previously. He says, remember, they're dreaming that they're going to be able to have a feast of destruction, a feast of victory against Israel and against Israel's Messiah, but then they're going to wake from that dream in a moment. That dream is the hubris that they can succeed in fully destroying the land and people of Israel. And instead, God's placed this bridle on them, but he's going to show up and he's going to deliver Israel instead, which is what we just talked about in Isaiah 29. You will have a song in the night, verse 29, as when a holy feast is kept. Now, this song in the night there is figurative of like the night of discipline, like a dark night of discipline. But he says, as a song as in the night when a holy feast is kept, because they would often have these feasts that would begin in the evening. And so they would have these songs and feasts that would start in the evening and go into the night. So there's this like midnight rejoicing that happens. That's happening in the middle of the figurative night of the tribulation. But he says, you're going to have a song as in the night when a feast is kept, and gladness of heart as when one sets out the sound of the flute to go to the mountains of the Lord, the rock of Israel. Saying there's going to be this deliverance that's going to bring you so much joy as your Messiah comes to deliver you from your adversaries. This song begins to erupt this actual musical worship that plays a part. And it's not just figurative. People say, well, it's just a song, a heart song. I think it's actually going to be a song. I think they're going to sing. And Isaiah goes on to describe some very specific singing. And the Lord will cause his majestic voice to be heard, and the descending blow of his arms will be seen. His furious anger, the flame of devouring fire, that was here in Deuteronomy 32. In Deuteronomy, the end of Deuteronomy 32, which is the redemption and deliverance of Israel, is going to happen. That's what he's describing here. Devouring fire, cloudburst, storm, and hailstones. That's the final deliverance when the Lord himself is acting to deliver Israel. The Assyrians will be in terror, stricken at the voice of the Lord. Now that's true in chapter 47 or chapter 37. But he says, no, even the great adversary, the final Assyrian adversary against Israel, is going to experience this in a permanent way. They're going to be in terror, stricken at the voice of the Lord when he strikes with his rod. And every stroke of the appointed staff that the Lord lays on him will be to the sound of your tambourines and lyres, the worship sound. Isn't that amazing? Saying the strokes of God's judgment against the adversarial nations are going to be synchronized with the beats of your tambourines and the melodies of your lyres. Can you believe that? There's a role of music in this. This is fascinating. Commentators admit, they're like, nobody can just explain away that there's some kind of relationship between God's judgment against Israel's adversaries and the worship of his people. Isaiah might be the clearest depiction of the power of the worship movement at the end of the age, probably alongside Psalm 149 would be the one I would pair with this. It's a 9-verse expansion of this verse here, right over there in Isaiah. And you can go to Psalm 149 and read through it. I've included it in the notes so you can see it, but it describes the exact same scenario. Almost like the psalmist just took Isaiah 30 and was like, let's just make a song about this. And there it is, Psalm 149. Just to finish off chapter 30, in a burning place that has long been prepared, indeed, for the king it has been made ready. Its pyre made deep and wide with fire, and wood in abundance. The breath of the Lord, like a steam of sulfur, kindles it. Now there's a burning place that has long been prepared. Is this land of perpetual desolation, which Moses talked about, which Isaiah is going to go on to talk about in more detail in a very close chapter that we're going to look at today. So I'm not going to get into that yet, but remember this reference because Isaiah is going to actually identify this place in chapter 34. So there we go. That's going to do it for chapter 30.